stumbled into 3 terrifying true stalker horror stories that will haunt you forever. I never should have opened that door. It was just another night in my small apartment. The kind of evening where the hush of the world wraps around me like a warm blanket. I was scrolling through my phone, a vague sense of comfort washing over me in the dim light. But then, the air shifted. A chill crept into the room, whispering warnings that churned my stomach. I sensed it before I saw it. The feeling of being watched. I glanced around, noting the half-shadowed corners that used to hold no fear. The clock ticked loudly, echoing in my ears as I took a deep breath, perfumed by the lingering scent of burnt coffee. Were those whispers? I could barely hear them, just a flutter, but it nagged at my mind. The walls seemed to close in. Shadows stretched and contorted, twisting into grotesque shapes that danced on my periphery. Panic coiled tighter in my chest as the noises grew. Laughter or cries, who even knew? I could no longer sit idly. Something was shifting, a weight in the dark beyond my door. I put my phone down, heart racing, and pressed an ear against the cold wood. Silence. Then a sudden crash echoed outside. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, the metal icy against my palm. The door creaked open, a portal to the unknown. What awaited me? Was it the thrill of discovery, or did danger lurk just outside my view? My heart hammered as I stepped cautiously into the hall. An overwhelming urge to run tugged at me. Something wasn't right. The stark white glow of the hallway light felt too bright, too revealing. I squinted, licking my dry lips, my mind racing through visions of what might be lurking around the corner. That's when I saw a figure, shrouded in darkness, just beyond the flickering light, watching me, dripping with intent. I gasped, my breath caught in my throat like a stone. It was coming closer. The floorboards creaked under the weight of an unseen presence. I turned to flee but felt a cold hand wrap around my wrist, pulling me back into the depths of fear. A scream erupted from my lips, echoing through the emptiness. But was it too late? The air thickened, pressing down on me as the door behind me slammed shut with a deafening thud, leaving only darkness and dread. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I was drowning in darkness, the kind that wraps around your soul and squeezes the breath from your lungs. The grip on my wrist tightened, icy fingers biting into my skin, and panic surged through me like a wildfire. I twisted violently, desperate to free myself, the unmistakable smell of old wood and mildew invading my senses. Let go, I gasped, but my voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence that blanketed the building. The shadows thickened, merging together, and the figure stepped into the weak light, revealing a gaunt, hollow-cheeked face. The eyes were wide and devoid of life, yet I felt an unfathomable hunger radiate from them. My heart raced with primal instinct and urge to survive, to escape this faceless terror. You shouldn't have opened that door, it rasped, the voice crawling through my skin like icy fingers. The hallway twisted and spiraled as I tried to comprehend its words. I stumbled backward, searching for an exit, any chance to evade that horrifying gaze. Why are you here? My question shattered the stillness, though it felt futile, as if the air itself could absorb the sound. The figure moved closer, its presence growing larger as reality thinned around me. I could feel it inhaling my fear. I need what's yours, it crooned, a soft melody that belied the dread sinking deeper into my bones. Each syllable coiled around my thoughts, wrapping them in a fog of despair. With a shudder, I turned to flee, my feet pounding against the floor, a rhythmic drumbeat of desperation. I raced towards the stairwell, but the world felt wrong, twisted and distorted. A frantic glance behind revealed the figure was no longer following. I halted, breathless, the silhouettes of the stairs casting ominous shapes, as if the building itself conspired against me. Through the dim light, I caught glimpses of the faces embedded within the walls, eyes eternally wide and mouths open in silent screams. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. How had I never seen them before? They seemed to pulse with a grotesque life, drawing me closer. I dared to reach out, but the moment my fingers grazed the cold surface, a shiver traveled through me, and the faces contorted in anguish, pressing against the boundaries of their prison. A low, gnawing sound emanated from below, a guttural growl, vibrating up through the floor like a distant thunder. I recoiled, my heart racing still faster, but the corridor offered no solace. The air thickened as I turned to run back toward my apartment. But as I reached for the door, it swung open with a creak, revealing a void of inky blackness within. The room was no longer my safe haven. I stepped back, but something behind me growled again, a low rumble that resonated deep within my bones. I felt a surge of something brush against my side, a chill that latched onto my skin like a parasite. I turned my head, glimpsing another shadow, creeping towards me with sinister intent. "Find me," it whispered, dangling its words like bait in the dark, and as it spoke, the walls rattled, and the faces erupted into frenzied cries, the cacophony clawing at my sanity. Just then, the lights began to flicker again, and with each pulse, a new horror unveiled itself around meth. Outlines of more figures emerged, gnarled and distorted, closing in from all sides. I was surrounded, and snared in a web of fear. My heart pounded, my chest constricted as I grabbed the doorframe, desperately weighing my escape options. But then, a familiar laugh echoed behind me, soft and mocking. I turned slowly, dread lacing my spine as I realized that this knew the dark corners of my past. The name etched into my mind sharper than a knife. "Did you really think it would end like this?" I stepped forward, all too familiar. The realization struck me like a bolt of icy. A face I thought I'd never see again was back, ready for revenge. And as that laugh wrapped around me like a noose, I was engulfed in darkness, the world spiraling into chaos. With a final heartbeat, I blinked, and everything wavered. Had I stepped into the darkness, or had it stepped into me? I could only scream as the shadows lunged forward, reaching for my soul, pulling me down into a void where no light could escape. I was jolted awake, gasping for breath, as if I had just resurfaced from the depths of that suffocating void. My room was achingly familiar. The peeling paint on the walls, the antique dresser that creaked ominously with every tremor, but the air felt thick-heavy with malice. It was darker than it should have been, and the shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own, licking at the edges of my reality. Sitting up, I strained to hear, for the laughter still echoed in the back of my mind, a haunting melody that twisted my insides. I could feel it, like an electric current running through the air, igniting an instinctual fear that coiled within me. There was no denying it. I was not alone. The ticking clock on my bedside table sounded louder than thunder, each second stretching impossibly long. I slipped out of bed, the cold floor sending a jolt up my spine. Every shadow cast by the moonlight seemed darker, more sinister, and as I slowly approached my window, I felt the urge to retreat clawing at my mind. I pulled aside the curtain, heart racing, only to be met with a sight that froze my blood. Across the street, a figure stood beneath the flickering lamplight, their face obscured beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The silhouette appeared unnaturally still, as if carved from stone, while the shadows around them twisted like an ink blot spilled on a canvas. I strained to see, but the figure was content to watch, unmoving, their aura pulsating with an unsettling energy. It felt as though they were fully aware of me, buried within my most hidden fears. A scream lodged in my throat as everything I had witnessed hours before came rushing back, those terrible faces embedded in the walls, the smell of decay, and that voice with its cold hunger. I stumbled backward, colliding with my dresser, and with a dizzying clarity, I realized I had opened a door I shouldn't have. I had invited something into my life that wanted to stay. Desperation fueled me as I dashed back to my bed, the soft sheets now feeling like a shroud, and I fell into a trembling heap. I closed my eyes and envisioned barricading myself against whatever evil crept through the darkness. Then I heard it. A slow, deliberate scratching emanating from beneath my bed. My breath hitched as the sound morphed into a rhythmic pattern. A small, childlike giggle threading through the malevolence. "Come play," the voice coaxed, tinkling like wind chimes through the trees. I opened my eyes, horrified but unable to fight the morbid fascination pulling at me. I inched toward the edge of the bed, peering cautiously underneath. A pair of small, pale hands gripped the edge, knuckles white. A shadowed face peering back at me, eyes glinting with madness. "Why are you hiding?" it whispered, a sickly sweet tone that curdled the air. I slammed my eyes shut and wrapped my arms around my knees, willing myself to engage in silence where there could be no response. But a soft, warm breath grazed the back of my neck, a taunting caress that compelled me to open my eyes again. Standing in my room were dozens of silhouettes, children, faces pale and gaunt, stretching out their arms toward me, their soundless cries handsome and haunting. I felt like a lighthouse lost in a storm, swirling chaos surrounding me, encroaching upon my sanity. The clock, relentless, counted down to oblivion, echoing the hearts of these wretched souls. "Join us," they chanted in unison, their voices merging into a cacophony of despair, pulling apart the seams of my mind. The child's laughter rang clear once more, crescendoing, leaping from one end of the room to the other until I felt the walls vibrating. The shadows writhed, a tempest brewing around me. A cold, black mist enveloped my feet, crawling upward with squeezing fingers, and suddenly, the bodies surged forward, a tide of spectral arms reaching, grasping, wanting. I needed to leap up, run, but my legs felt weighed down by an unseen force. I screamed, the sound swallowed by darkness, and in the chaos, from the heart of the tumult, that familiar laughter echoed once more, now accompanied by dozens of giggles. "Come play with us forever," they exclaimed in delight, clashing with the ominous laughter that bordered on reverie, chilling me to the core. Suddenly, amid the writhing apparitions, a figure broke through, a familiar silhouette in that cursed hat, grinning with malevolence, their presence eroding reality itself. I backed up, pressuring myself against the wall, the grotesque forms edging closer, encasing me in fear. "Did you enjoy your moment?" it taunted, a malicious grin spreading across its face. I turned to flee, the specters advancing, and I could only hope to find an escape amongst the encroaching darkness. But just as I reached for the door, I found it locked. Panic surged through me, a liquid fire that left no room for thought. And then an awful, thick laugh erupted, as if the shadows themselves were enjoying my terror, and then everything went black. The darkness enveloped me, a suffocating veil that twisted and turned, swallowing every sound, thought, and breath. I floated in an abyss, suspended between consciousness and stark terror. My mind skittered like a trapped insect against the walls of my skull, desperately searching for escape. A thick quiet loomed, stretched into seconds that felt like hours, until a piercing shriek sliced through the void, jolting me back to reality. That I gasped, hands clawing at the suffocating air, my heart strumming the panic of 1,000 drums. The room was awash with dim gray light, flickering erratically as though struggling to maintain its hold against the inky shadows. But as I blinked and composure settled, I realized I was no longer in my bedroom. The peeling paint and creaking dresser had vanished, replaced by the unsettling vibration of that ill-fated visage, the one in the HM. My breath quickened as I surveyed the surroundings, an eerie sense of familiarity igniting dread deep within. I was in the basement, the ancient stone walls damp, its coldness creeping through my flesh. The musty odor of mildew wrapped around me, and just beyond the doorway, I glimpsed an expansive hallway, lined with flickering bulbs that flickered like the fading pulse of the damned. My mind reeled. Visions of that vile figure and its whispered invitations clawed at my insides. With no choice but to move forward, I hesitated at the threshold, where dim illumination barely chased away the shadows. As I stepped into the corridor, I felt the chill in the air thickening, charged with a dark urge that sent shivers down my spine. The sensation of being watched crawled over me once more, the feeling of countless eyes trailing my every motion, while the laughter faint, yet unmistakably alive echoed softly from somewhere behind me. My instincts screamed, urging me to turn back, to fight against this malevolence. But I pressed on, guesswork in my step guiding me toward an unseen destination. The corridor stretched ahead, with doorways on either side, their cracked doors yawning like hungry mouths. I dared to peek through the first one, only to find a room cluttered with forgotten toys, mangled dolls with eyes so wide they seemed to plead for their lives. In the center, a rocking horse creaked back and forth without a soul to anchor it, a ghastly accompaniment to the sinister laughter weaving through the air. I retreated, heart racing, aware I had stumbled into something wicked, trapped between realms of the living and the damned. As I stole past the next door, ready to ignore the siren call of whatever horrors lay behind, that laughter transformed into something more sinister, an unsettling chant that unnerved even the deepest corners of my subconscious. "Join us. Be one of us," it wailed, desperate and gleeful. My heart pounded. But I pressed forward, the lure of darkness pulling heavier as I neared a massive wooden door at the far end of the hall. It loomed ominously, every intimidating groove of its surface telling tales of suffering I dared not imagine. I pushed against it, a quick, desperate breath escaping my lips as it swung open, creaking into a world of folded shadows. Inside lay a room that stole the breath from my lungs. A circle of dolls, hundreds, their lifeless eyes wide and glassy, surrounded a massive mirror that seemed to distort reality. The glass fractured, gathering flickers of light, amplifying the dread fidgeting in the pit of my stomach. The whispers grew louder, gnashing at my thoughts, each fragment hammering into the walls of my sanity. I staggered back, lost in the sea of haunting visages, when suddenly every doll turned its unblinking gaze toward me, their mouths twisting into wide, disconcerting grins. "Stay with us," they called in unison, their small voices harmonizing into a lullaby that tugged at my core, chilling me to an absolute stillness. "No, I want to leave," I screamed, my voice raw as it echoed in the warped chamber, seemingly swallowed by the ever-diminishing light. As panic surged, the mirror before me rippled, reflecting not just my terrified face, but shapes shifting behind it, figures unfurling from the glass, emerging from the depths of the cursed reality that lay trapped. Each figure was adorned in a twisted parody of childhood innocence, writhing and reaching out as if desperate for warmth. Their features morphed into grimaces of anguish, blurring the lines between playfulness and horror that clawed at my mind. A sudden burst of clarity washed over me. This was not just a dream. This was a door, an invitation into darkness I had opened, and it was hungry. Just then, the floor trembled beneath my feet, and laughter erupted, a crescendo of silence shattering into tumultuous glee. I turned to flee the room, but just as swiftly, the dolls leaped, their movements blurring into one horrid, collective mass. The door slammed shut behind me with a final, thunderous echo, sealing my fate as I stumbled forward into the gathering shadows that craved my surrender. And then abruptly, everything fell silent. In the staggering quiet, the mirror cracked and split, pieces of its reflective surface cascading onto the floor like shattered dreams, splintering through the surrounding darkness. With a gnawing certainty, I knew they were coming for me, and the laughter returned, this time filled with a twisted craving. "Join us." The air shifted, thick with an oppressive presence as the jagged shards of the mirror clattered across the floor. The laughter, once a distant echo, now swelled with a fervor that rattled the very foundations of my sanity. I could feel the energy pulsating around me, a sinister current rising to claim its victim. My heart raced as the pounding footsteps grew louder, footsteps that didn't belong to me. They were not mine, yet I could feel their weight and urgency, creeping closer, thrumming against my skin like a warning of the horrors to unfold. Rounding on the miniature circle of dolls, I was met with the transformation of their stagnant smiles into expressions of unfathomable glee. They were alive, throbbing with a gnawing delight that sent icy tendrils wrapping around my throat. In the stillness, they swayed gently, pulsating with a rhythm that siphoned the air from my lungs. Whispers veiled in compassion surfaced, urging me to let go of my fears and step into the warm embrace of oblivion. Why fight it? We've been waiting for you. They sang, their voices layered like melted wax, simultaneously liquid and solid. They wanted me could feel it in my very marrow, and their anticipation filled the room with a suffocating intensity, against my better judgment. I glanced back at the mirror shards strewn across the floor, each glinting fragment beckoning me with alluring glimpses of clarity. My reflection, once a visage of terror, now shimmered with a warmth that felt both seductive and terrible. Behind me, the dolls edged closer, their miniature hands reaching out with unnatural grace. I spun, the edges of my vision clouding with flickering shadows that danced along the walls, figures peeling free from the depth of the cracked mirror. My limbs felt heavy, burdened by an unseen force that tugged at my psyche, dragging me closer to the threshold of surrender. It was then that I noticed them writhing in the background, ghostly figures suspended in desperate postures, forever trapped between worlds. Their torment was palpable as they fought against invisible restraints, faces twisted in hollow screams. I had found the echoes of countless souls, those who had come before, now mere vestiges, their faces drained of color, hopes extinguished like candle flames beneath the weight of darkness. Help us. One raspy whisper cut through the cacophony, a plea so raw it hacked at my resolve. I took a responsive step back, caught off guard as their presence flooded my senses, the chill of their desperation mingling with the warmth of the beckoning dolls. The tension tightened, an elastic band stretching further until it threatened to snap. Suddenly, the room plunged into chaos. Dolls darted forward, becoming a blur of fabric and porcelain, a relentless tide rushing toward me. I stumbled back, scrambling for the wall, fingers brushing against the rough stone surface until I felt a slimy wetness, something clinging to the wall like a forgotten memory. My eyes widened. Slime, or worse, coated in something darker, a living residue of anguish that sunk into my skin. That I clung to my sanity like a fraying rope, heart thunderous in my chest. Within that moment of dread, the laughter transitioned to manic whispers spiraling out of control. It spiraled into something primal, a voice layered with fury. Join us, for we're a part of this wretched family. It hissed, laced with a promise of distorted love, enticing yet horrifying. Driven by instinct, I turned yet again to the direction of the shattered birthplace of their existence, the mirror. With a surge of adrenaline, I sprinted toward the glimmering shards, praying that perhaps I could shatter their hold on my soul. The dolls lunged for me in a cacophony of shrieks, their chorus becoming a discordant symphony of rage and despair. As I lunged with both hands toward the mirror's heart, darkness descended like a curtain, swallowing everything in its path. Shadows erupted, twisting and contorting until they formed a grotesque silhouette of the figure in the hat, its leering grin splitting the air with a resonant cackle, piercing through the whispers with undeniable clarity. Suddenly, a cold grip seized my arm, a clenching vice that sent jolts of dread surging through me. I felt the fabric of this nightmarish realm tightening around me as the darkness coiled, dragging me into an inexorable fate. Just then, the mirror exploded into a million crystalline shards, sending deadly teeth spiraling across the room. I squealed, narrowly dodging a vicious fragment, but the grip tightened further, pulling me into the heart of the gathering void behind the fragmented glass. There was no escape from the seething darkness encroaching, nor from the chorus of laughter that swirled through the chaos in all-consuming triumph. Join us, the tortured faces wailed, as I was yanked toward the fractured gateway, shadows swallowing my screams as it dimmed to a whisper, a final echo of my resistance. But just before being consumed by that unholy embrace, I caught one last glimpse of myself reflected in the mirror fragments, smiling, heartless, engulfed in the madness of the dolls that now called my name. And as everything faded to black, I realized my reflection was no longer just a reflection. In the depths of my terror, the undeniable truth revealed itself with horrifying finality. I was not the last nor the first. I would not escape their call. With overwhelming despair gnawing at my heart, darkness finally claimed me, and I felt the laughter genuine and infernal inside me. The air crackled with a thick tension that twisted my insides and clawed at my throat. I was submerged in a quiet yet maddening void, my senses dulled except for the cold brush of something unseen scraping against my consciousness. Panic surged in waves, crashing over me like icy water, dragging me deeper into that all-consuming darkness. They wanted me. Their insatiable hunger throbbed like a heartbeat in the silence, relentless and alive. A voice, sharp and crystalline, pierced through the murk. "Fetch her back, my darlings." It reverberated, echoing from what felt like the very core of the void, sharpening my worry into something formidable. I felt a twinge of desperate hope. Perhaps it was the person I had been clinging to in my mind, an echo of a previous self that seemed all but lost. But the darkness pulsed, twisting around me like an embrace meant for a corpse rather than a living being. Whispers carried on the edge of the shadows, tantalizing, creeping messages that twisted understanding into madness. "You were meant for us." They drizzled like honey from sinister tongues, suggesting love filtered through blood and despair. "You belong here, among the forgotten." A specific memory rose forth, crashing over me with such clarity. The faces of the dolls in their menacing glee, their porcelain features illuminated under the soft glow of candlelight. They had not been mere toys. They were vessels, suffused with the anguished spirits lost in this labyrinth of horrors. My thoughts whirled back, unwilling to let go, even as tendrils of despair spiraled around my heart. Then came the laugh, bright and echoing yet harsh. It felt familiar. An unyielding chill chased its echo through that abyss. I'd known that laughter. I had heard it momentarily in echoes of the past. "Join us, my dear," it murmured, seducing me with familiarity. "Become one with us." The idea did not feel foreign. The void welcomed me with arms wide open, and every smear of darkness. Shadowy tendrils slipped through the air, grasping at the edges of my thoughts. I could almost see them, figures swathed in the blackness, observing, inching closer. From the chaos erupted more ghostly forms, flitting beyond my reach, their features contorted into mocking imitations of affection. Suddenly, I was yanked with alarming force, pulled into the core of the gathering shadows. The wisps enveloped me, wrapping me in their cold grasp, whispering secrets woven from pain and longing. Memories flickered before me like ghostly images behind a film of water. My childhood home, laughter of friends long gone, the resonating whisper of promises made in light only to be enveloped in darkness. "Help! Help!" came a voicey frantic cry ripping through my reverie, striking through the shrouded mist like lightning. It resonated with desperation, summoning fragments of my shattered spirit. My heart raced wildly, remembering that I struggled against the invasion, clawing beneath their hold, reaching for the source of that plea. It echoed futility, each cry devoured by the pressing shadows. I could feel their delight in my turmoil, their hunger growing as I gasped for purpose amidst the chaos. The echo transformed, gaining clarity, but it was not mine. "Don't abandon us," it wailed again, the sound reverberating through my shattered form like a haunting song. The horror of the words scraped against my mind, urging me to turn, to confront the dreadful truth I had run from all along. The grasp around my heart tightened painfully, a squeeze of realization merging with anguish. I was not the only one called to this place. "You were not chosen," the voice of the dolls sang through cruel mockery. "You are merely an offering returned to us." The shadows morphed, converging into a haunting visage. I caught sight of distorted faces writhing in pain, ghostly souls forever seeking solace. They were reaching for Mino through me. I felt intertwined with their despair, my essence breaking, becoming part of the grotesque tapestry they wove in the dark. I was becoming them. Suddenly, the laughter grew into a tempest, and the visage toggled. Before me a mirror poised to unleash unimaginable visions. Turning my head, I beheld an absurd reflection. Not mine, but the embodiment of their anguish. A wretched silhouette grinning back at me with a mouthful of darkness. I had been alive too long. My grasp on sanity slipped like sand through fingers, and then, the laughter erupted into a mighty roar, reverberating through every bone in my body. The shadows danced maniacally, and just as I thought I could resist, something shattered within me. A scream tore from my lips as the reflection lunged forward, its arms outstretched to embrace me. The world tipped away, landing with a bone-shaking crack, and in the silence that followed, I found myself standing, untouched and free, yet the looming silence only punctuated the truth. I was not alone. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end, as I turned and beheld those who had cried for aid. Their hollow eyes filled with a desperate hunger, their forms drifting in the shadows, both familiar yet grotesque. "You must choose," they whispered, their voices a medley of longing and despair, intertwining like vines wrapping around my heart. "Will you forsake your own to embrace this new family?" Panic surged anew as I stumbled backward, wider and wider, until the dolls' faces reminded me of my reflection, the choice I had yet to make looming before me like an eternal void. Then, with horrifying clarity, I understood what lay ahead. A pressing unease intensified as I felt hands slipping onto my shoulders, drawing dangerously close, gaping mouths exhaled a chilling breath. One final sorrow-laden mantra vibrated through the night. "Join us, forever," before I completely faded into their collective beckoning. Something shifted again in the darkness anew, more sinister presence emerged, and when I glanced back, I found that I was now surrounded by countless reflections of myself, all somehow alive. Each mirrored soul held a different expression of terror, somehow mocking my own. Caught in a web of twisted identities, the shadows encircled me, and from amongst that terrible sea of versions of my own tortured self came a laugh, sharper than glass. "You will choose, and love will find you one way or another," and as I felt my knees buckle under the weight of it all, I realized I was not a part of this world. I was merely their canvas painted with the colors of dread, forever caught in their malignant grasp. With every reflection, I felt the suffocating grip of inevitability curve around my throat, and I braced for what was yet to come, knowing full well that the worst was still lurking, waiting to claim me entirely. The laughter faded into a low hum, a morbid backdrop to the echoes of my own desperation. That terrible reflection, the embodiments of a life lost multiplied within the shadows, each one lurking closer, their desires weaving through the fabric of my mind like a malignant thread. A rising sense of dread coiled around my spine, threatening to snap me in two. Choose. They echoed, their voices merging and diverging, creating a cacophony that surged like a tide. Each word pulsated with energy, vibrating deep within my core, where remnants of hope and fear collided violently. I was no longer certain where I ended and they began. Every flicker of their eyes mirrored a dimension of my own lost identity. They were my stony-faced reflection, yet each was smeared with a unique suffering. Pulling at the strings of my humanity. "Choose, or be chosen," came a whisper from the chaotic mosaic, a chilling caress of dread that enveloped me like fog. The compulsion bore down on me with a weight so heavy I could barely breathe, snuffing out the last flicker of rebellion. The ground beneath me felt unreal, shifting, as if it were alive and mocking my inaction. In the midst of their haunting chorus, I finally noticed something beyond them. A shadow breached the outskirts, emerging from the depth of darkness with an unsettling grace. It flickered in and out of my peripheral vision, a silhouette rippling beneath the surface like an unsettling reflection. It was not a reflection of pain, but rather a promise coded in malice. My heart quickened as the shadow coalesced just beyond reach. It bore an uncanny resemblance to a figure I had lost long before stepping into this netherworld, and the sight ignited the embers of memory, a fleeting warmth that felt altogether foreign within this aching void. I remembered her face, soft and ethereal, filled with compassion, a light I now desperately longed for in the oppressive darkness. "Please," I cried out, driven by a primal urge deep within. "Help me." I felt raw and vulnerable, my voice barely a whisper against the symphony of tormented souls. The room fell into a tense silence, absorbing my words, and what lay beyond the horizon of despair flickered, as though the shadows hesitated, momentarily swayed by my plea. The figure stepped closer, emerging from the void, its face taking shape in the dim light. My breath hitched as recognition struck me like a lightning bolt. It was Hermie's sister, the one who had disappeared without a trace long ago. I was overcome with a tumultuous flood of emotion, the agony of longing mingling with the sweetness of remembrance. "I thought I lost you," I gasped, reaching out with trembling hands, desperate to grasp the warmth of her spirit. But something shifted in her gaze, the depths of her eyes swirling with a darkness that spoke of torment and imprisonment. "You shouldn't have come here," she murmured, her voice a mere echo of the comfort it once held. "You've drawn their interest, and dear sister, they will not let you go." Fear coiled tighter around my heart as the crowd of souls surged forward, a collective gasping movement that imbued the air with a suffocating weight. My sister's form wavered, blurring at the edges like the dissipating smoke of a dying flame. "The dolls, they need you," she continued, an eerie calm settling over her words. "You must choose before they seal your fate." Her voice faded as the shadows clamored for attention, curling monstrous hands around her ethereal frame, trying to pull her into their dark embrace. "No!" I screamed, but the horror of her impending loss raged before me, battling with my own looming sacrifice. "You can't take her. She's mine." In that moment, the air skyrocketed in intensity, surging with a manic energy. An oppressive silence fell, wrapping around us tighter than a noose. Their hunger swelled, growing stronger as they pressed against me like a tide threatening to overwhelm. One voice emerged from their ranks, ringing clear above the sinister tumult. "A choice must be made. It is her or you." The room spun violently, each shadow vying for a piece of the conflict. I felt my resolve shatter, sharp shards of clarity slicing through the chaos. Would I choose my sister only to diminish her? Eternally lost to the darkness, or would I abandon her to save myself? My heart raced, caught in the web of betrayal it had woven between love and survival. But as my fingers stretched toward the sister I had mourned, I felt the creeping tendrils snaking around my wrists, drawing me back. And amidst the cacophony, a low, haunting laugh erupted. The shadows formed a palpable wall, laughing, taunting. Their joy at the turmoil flowed into me, and suddenly, I understood my sister was no longer just a lost soul. She was part of the dark tapestry, one more weave in their grotesque design. With a final, pleading glance, she flickered as if caught in a tempest of malevolence, and before I could grasp her truth, all was swallowed by a blinding light that I found myself standing alone again in that cursed space. The echoes of despair had returned, but now they carried a simmering malevolence within. The cruel laughter resumed, drumming in unison with my heart. "The choice is made," they proclaimed, and the chilling harmony surged like a tide. "Now, let's find out how deeply the abyss can run." And as the eerie stillness shifted into tumult, reality itself began to warp. The familiar yet sinister faces of my own despair closed in, and I realized, too late, the boundaries were dissolving. The remnants of my sister's silhouette shimmered briefly in the obscured edges, then faded entirely, but the grasp of the shadows grew heavier, more malicious. I shrieked, but the laughter intensified, reverberating through the air with such ferocity it rattled my teeth. I felt the world shift once more, dark figures swirling around me. I had become a player in their grotesque game, and the price was always paid in blood. Just as horror took its grip on me, darkness surged forward, consuming my screams. As I surrendered to the gathering abyss, a chilling realization washed over me. Not only had I become part of this horrific communion, my sister would always linger, watching, waiting for her turn to choose. The last thing I saw before the void engulfed me was her faint, ghostly smile, whispering words of betrayal that would echo forever in my haunted mind. I end that final heartbeat. I knew I had simply become another doll, forever trapped in this nightmarish reflection, a fragment of a once warm existence, endlessly pursued. The surrounding darkness thickened as the echoes of my final thought faded, plunging me into a nightmarish landscape. I was encased in a world that pulsed with liffey, a grotesque parody of the one I had left behind. Shadows flitted around me like whispers of nightmares past, their elongated forms twisting and contorting, inviting me deeper into their realm of torment. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My voice had been devoured by the insatiable hunger of the shadows, leaving me in an oppressive silence thick with dread. The ground beneath my feet felt damp, not with rain or earth but with the essence of fear, a reflection of the myriad souls that festered in this cursed domain. Each step I took sent ripples through the decaying memories that lingered in the air, urging me to remember what I could not bear to recall. Ahead of me, a flickering light appeared, dancing like a poisonous flame. It beckoned with its unmistakable allure, promising salvation or perhaps a glimpse of the sister I thought I had lost. As I drew closer, the flicker intensified, elongating into the shape of a child small and fragile, with wide, glassy eyes that bore an unsettling vacancy. The ghostly image shimmered under the oppressive gloom, an innocent visage beneath a veil of dread. "Are you lost too?" the apparition asked, tilting its head in a disconcerting mimicry of childlike curiosity. The sound of its voice, sweet yet hollow, sent shivers racing down my spine. "I don't know," I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs as I fought the temptation to back away. "Where is this place?" The child's smile widened, stretching impossibly. "This is a place where choices are made, where we wait." Its eyes bored into mine, and I struggled to maintain my composure under the weight of its gaze. "But it's not up to us to decide." Suddenly, the shadows stirred, their whispers rising into a feral growl as if my question had roused something even darker. I sensed a shift in the air, an electric tension that prickled at my skin. The room began to pulsate, walls of darkness rippling like liquid ink, contorting and expanding, bending reality to their whims. "Don't listen to them," the child urged, its voice now laced with urgency, the brightness of its presence dimming in the face of the encroaching shadows. "They crave despair. They want to take everything from you." I wanted to argue, to scream that they had already taken my sister, but a chilling realization unfurled in my Minda monstrous clarity. This child could be the embodiment of my innocence lost, a harbinger of the fate that awaited me if I lingered in this place. Shadows began to swarm, the playfulness in their base humor transforming into violent hunger. "Run!" yelled the child, its voice slicing through the mounting fear. "You must choose quickly." With the shadows' laughter echoing around me, I turned and bolted, my heart racing as the landscape morphed with every stride. Gnarled branches reached out, grasping like skeletal hands, scratching at my skin as I ran. The overwhelming urge to escape blurred my thoughts, pushing me further into the unknown, where the vibrant threads of memory twisted into an oscillating blur. Vision pounding, I could see fleeting glimpses of my sister, her face contorted in anguish, overlapping with shadows that seemed to mock her existence. Desperation turned to panic as walls of darkness closed in, the oppressive weight of their whispers gnawing at my sanity. Flashes of fragmented memories surged in. Visions of my sister and our childhood resurfaced amidst blinding flashes. I heard her laugh, a joyous sweetness, but it twisted horribly in my mind, morphing like a grotesque specter as shadows laughed around me, echoing in cruel harmony as I stumbled through the haze of memories and echoes. Something snapped in the predator lurking within the darkness. I felt the shadows surge forward, wrapping around my ankles and pulling me back, clawing me deeper into their clutches. The cacophony of laughter crescendoed, consuming my thoughts, drowning out my cries. At that moment, the child's voice rang out once more, hauntingly clear amidst the chaos. "You can still choose. Your fate is not sealed." With renewed urgency, I focused all my energy on breaking free, the specter of my sister pulsing at the edge of my mind. "I choose." I began to cry against the encroaching darkness, desperation fighting against my exhaustion. But as my voice grew louder, it became but a whisper against the overwhelming tide. Suddenly, everything around me erupted in a dissociative flash of light and shadow, the weight of despair lifting momentarily. But as reality twisted one last time, something broke within me. A searing pain ripped through my heart, a visceral reminder of the choice I had yet to make. Time stood still, and in that moment, everything faded to an echoing silence. Their laughter echoed, now tinged with a growling hunger, as a new voice joined the fray, one that sent icy fingers of dread creeping up my spine. "Stranger, do you wish to take her place?" And there, amidst the cacophony, I was met with the sight of my sister once more, but now I could see the truth etched into her ethereal face. I had a choice to make, but as dread gripped me stronger than ever, there, lurking beyond, a shadow shifted, a sinister shape rising as the walls of this horror closed in. There could be no turning back now. Something terrible was coming for me, and the echoes of everything I had lost rumbled ominously, demanding a choice that may leave me to stand alone, forever entangled in the web they wove with darkness and despair. Before I could make sense of what lay ahead, the ground beneath me shattered, and I was overcome by the void. The ground crumbled as though it were made of sand, tossing me into a free fall of swirling blackness. Desperation clawed at my throat, the echoes of whispers morphing into screams as I plummeted deeper into the abyss. It felt as if the shadows were reaching for me, grasping at my limbs with skeletal fingers, intent on pulling me into their relentless embrace. In a flash, the world around me fractured, dissolving into a forest cloaked in sorrow, a mirage that seeped despair with each leaf that fell. I landed with a jarring thud, the damp earth welcoming me with a sickening squelch, as if drinking in the remnants of my spirit. I clambered to my feet, breathless and trembling, scanning my unfamiliar surroundings. Trees loomed overhead, their branches twisted and gnarled like wounded hands reaching upward, as if begging for salvation. A chilling wind stirred through the clearing, carrying with it the scent of decay. Was it the pungent aroma of rot, or something far worse? I had not a moment to ponder before I felt the all-consuming weight of being watched as if summoned by my dread. The whispers returned, slithering through the air and filling it with incoherent echoes. Follow, they beckoned, drawing me toward a path lined with thorny brambles, each step feeling heavier than the last. Shadows slithered from behind the trees, taking forms that morphed and twisted, flickering like dying embers. But as the whispers shifted into unintelligible shrieks, I caught a glimpse of the darkness surrounding me. They were not mere shadows. They were echoes of souls lost long before a gaunt assembly of despair, each face a haunting blend of sorrow and rage. "You don't belong here," one of them croaked, a hollow rasp that hung in the air like a blade. That I stumbled backward, a cold sweat drenching my palms. "I'm looking for my sister," I gasped into the overwhelming silence. "Please, I have to find her." The faces turned toward me, their empty eyes reflecting a shared torment. A chorus of pain surged in their response. "She is with us," another voice growled, deep and resonant, reverberating through the very ground I stood upon. The realization struck me like a blow to the chest. They were part of the same void that had trapped her, the malevolent guardians of this cursed realm. As I raced down the path in bitter blind panic, unwilling to believe what I had just learned, I could hear her laughter echoing in the darkness, a cruel parody of joy that twisted and warped until it turned into cries for help. "Rena!" I screamed, my voice breaking against the unfathomable silence. "Rena, where are you?" The forest trembled, the shadows responding to my cries, swarming towards me in a mass of undulating darkness that tightened like a vice around my throat. Fear propelled me forward, for even the daylight seemed to record my essence, refusing me escape into the light. Just ahead, I saw the flicker of another light, pulsating like a heartbeat in the engulfing night. I raced toward it, driven by instinct and desperation. The cries of the lost echoed, reverberating within my soul, amplifying my need for answers. But as I approached the light, it morphed into the shape of a Dora heavy oaken thing, its surface marred by strange symbols that squirmed and flickered like lost souls. "Open it," the whispers hissed, blending together to form a maddening cacophony. With a surge of terror and determination, I reached for the door handle, the cold metal biting into my palm like a warning. Hesitation clawed at me, but the thought of Rena surged higher than my fear. I turned the handle and pushed. The door creaked open to reveal a chamber filled with swirling mist, lit from above by a sickly purple light. At its center was a river of dark liquid, flowing with a sickening, sluggish rhythm. Before I could comprehend the horror, a figure emerged from the depths, a woman dressed in tattered clothes, her face veiled by tendrils of dark hair. But it was her eyes that struck me with raw fear. They were black holes, pulling me into their abyss. "You've come to find her," she said, her voice echoing like a distant memory, devoid of warmth. "But can you withstand the truth of your choice?" "Rena," I shouted, stepping closer, anguish threading through my voice. The shadows clung to the edges of the chamber, screeching like banshees as the room began to quake violently, pushing me back toward the door. Fate demands a sacrifice. She snarled, the shadows swirling around her as she extended a bony hand toward the river. Choose which one to lose, or lose them both. A sickening chill rushed through me. I was caught in an agonizing moment of choice, the darkness whispering temptations and fears beyond comprehension. Time stretched thin as the shadows writhed in anticipation, my heart pounding louder than the cacophony around me. Suddenly, I felt Rena's presence, flickering just beyond the veil of shadows, and an image flared to life in my mind, her cheerful smile, the way she used to sing to ward off nightmares. That haunting laughter, however, juxtaposed now against the shadow's torment, without a clear decision made. Time bounded onward, and before I could react, the chamber rumbled violently, vibrating with darkness. The choice is now, wailed the woman as the walls of the chamber strained under the mounting weight of shadows that screamed both in torturous anguish and sinister delight. That I had to choose. The darkness closed in, and I could feel Rena slipping further from my grasp amidst the chaos, my heart fracturing into pieces. No, I cried, and as the shadows lunged forward, an agonizing realization fused with terror. I had lost my chance, and the shadows hungered for my soul. In a final grasp of despair, I reached out blindly into the void, ready to be consumed when everything erupted in a cataclysm of screams and laughter, collapsing around me as I was torn between two realms, a prisoner in the ever-tightening grasp of darkness, faced with an impossible choice that loomed amidst the fog of despair. And then something much worse than my choice emerged from the shadows, a grotesque figure, a twisted reflection of everything I feared, unfurling before me as the abyss demanded its due. I awoke to a symphony of chaos, my breath hitching in my throat as shadows burrowed into every crevice of my mind. I was ensnared in a tempest of darkness, stitched together by the threads of nightmares that clung to my skin like frostbite. The air crackled electric, alive with fragments of desperation that whispered my name, intertwining with the cacophony of tortured echoes. I now existed in a space suspended between the grasping shadows and the flickers of a haunting familiarity. That I stumbled through the void, insecure in my footing, the voices growing louder, morphing into a sinister melody of warped encouragement. You have returned, they crooned, the weight of their words pressing against my chest, heavy and invasive. Welcome back to the fold. Where is she? I gasped, as my yearning for Rena pulsed like an open wound within. Please, just tell me where she is. My earnest plea cut through the clamor, and for a moment, the throbbing echoes receded, a silence echoing with my anxious heartbeat. You wish to find your sister. A voice resonated, pulling me from the depths of the shadows. The figure materialized from the darkness, a warped silhouette with a flickering form. I squinted through the gloom, recognizing the malicious semblance of the ghostly woman who had once haunted my dreams. But your sister is no longer who you remember. She has become part of us, as will you. No. We'll find her. She's alive, I retorted, the flame of defiance igniting within me, spattering the gloom with the remnants of my shattered hope. The shadows swirled around my legs, realizing my resistance, twisting with violent hunger. The laughter returned, a battering chorus that washed over me, threatening to break my will. She has taken her place in the dance of the damned, the woman hissed, her grin spreading impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. And now the choice remains before you. What choice? I cried, feet backpedaling against the encroaching tide. I had seen the cost of that decision manifested in the faces of the lost souls, twisted remnants of who they had once been. Will you merge with the darkness, step into your sister's place, and join the family? She taunted, the void pulsating wildly as if expecting my answer. Oh, I shouted defiantly, the remnants of my sister's laughter echoing in my mind like a ghost's haunting refrain, a bittersweet harmony wrapped in anguish. I fought against the clamoring shadows drawing closer, molding my resolve into a weapon. But the shadows coalesced into grotesque shapes, darting out like quicksilver, blending with the woman's form, their blackened tendrils whispering promises of belonging. As I battled against the weight of despair, I felt the edges of my resolve begin to blur, the darkness inviting me like an old friend. That I lunged for an exit unseen, hurriedly crashing through the morass of air, chaos behind me intensifying into clashing howls. "You must make a choice before it is too late," she bellowed, her voice cracking like a thunderclap, and the laughter around me amplified in a manic chorus. "Rena!" I screamed, the name bursting forth in a wail of anguish, tugging at the frayed edges of reality. The shadows recoiled momentarily, shifting like a raging tide against the shore, and I suddenly stood before an ancient door flashing to life amid the darkness, a door I had never registered before. Hope surged through me, palpable and warm, my fingers trembling against its brittle surface, etched with carvings that glimmered like distant memories. What was on the other side? Would it yield Rena trapped between light and shadow, or more torment? I braced myself and flung the door wide open. It swung with an unnerving creak, revealing a room aglow with an otherworldly fire that flickered, illuminating a familiar grotesque semblance of our childhood home. "Rena!" I shouted as I dashed inside, frantic and desperate, visions of seeping darkness swirling behind me. The room pulsed with an eerie life, and there, standing in the dim glow, was my sister. "Rena!" I cried, tears of relief sprouting as I rushed forward. Each step, filled with the yearning I had harbored, the longing drowning out the malicious laughter which faded into the periphery. Her expression was tranquil, too serene against the backdrop of chaos that surrounded us, and as I reached out, the shadows that lingered coiling around the edges grew frigid, palpable. "Help me," she whispered, the words a delicate wisp but laced with incomprehensible sorrow. My heart seized in my chest, and I read the truth etched across her face. I took a furious step back, realization crashing like a tidal wave. No, I won't lose you to the darkness," I cried, fighting against the rising tide of despair threatening to engulf us both. But the shadows swirled thickly, writhing eagerly, resonating with a collective hunger. "Join us," the shadows hissed, their chorus echoing the promise of unearthly unity. Yet the chorus felt like poisoned honey, sweet yet toxic. In desperation, I grasped Rena's hand, holding tight against the impending gloom. "Hold on. We can fight. We can escape." She nodded, tears glistening in her wide, glassy eyes, masking the horror that awaited. But as I pulled her along, the shimmering fabric of reality warped around us, the air erupting into a vortex of dark laughter, the walls trembling under the pressure of the shadows. Comprehension struck me like a dagger. Rena was no longer whole. She had been absorbed, consumed, the horror of her existence transmuted into something far worse than death. I was tethered to a specter of her former self, a ghost flickering amid the shadows, and with that epiphany, my heart fractured. "I won't let you take her," I howled, the bitter toll of grief mingling with the raging tempest closing in. "Let us go." With all my strength, I pulled her closer, but the shadows lunged, casting deep hooks, ravenous to claim both of us. In an explosion of darkness, I felt the fabric of time stretch and pull, and just as I was about to succumb to the chaos that closed in around me, Rena's expression shifted. A flicker of recognition shimmered in her eyes before she whispered softly, "I am not who I was," and then, before I could comprehend the weight of her truth, a final tug yanked us apart. The depths of despair shattered around us like glass splintering against the ground, and as rays of fractured light poured through, I screamed, but it was too late. Rena and I were torn apart in a raw, brutal surge, and the echo of her haunting laughter intertwined with the chaotic symphony, twisting into a dark harmony that played on repeat. One last vision flickered mercilessly. A scene of remembrance, where she and I played hide and seek in the sun-drenched streets of our youth, vibrant colors pulsing in the backdrop. Jets of light coursed through the scene, spinning into a kaleidoscope of hope before plunging into darkness, and the last thing I heard again, over the echoes of laughter and despair, was that woman's voice whispering, "The choice was made long before you entered." Now, standing alone in the void, I knew me fate had intertwined with those shadows, my soul a new doll in the wretched display. A round, empty smile painted across my features as a chill swept through, sending tremors down my spine. The last vicious laugh echoed through the abyss. One final haunting farewell. Welcome home forever.